Good morning, welcome to the Deep 404. Avdiivka, which has been fought over since 2014, 10 years of fighting really around Avdiivka. It's just to the northwest of Donet city and has been one of the locations reportedly where shelling of Donet city, the civilian population of Donet city, has occurred from Avdiivka. It's a long, thin sort of strip of a township, Avdiivka, an industrial area, and at its most northern end, a coke processing plant. Avdiivka has, for a number of months now, the Russian forces have worked their way around that long length, coming in from the northeast and then coming up from the south and coming in from the southwest. And they have done that to an extent. They put enough pressure on the Ukrainian forces defending Avdiivka that in the last couple of days, they have been able to close a gap around the southern side of Avdiivka and bridge the fields, the open fields that were there, get to the southern side of Avdiivka, get into the township there, and the Russians have been able to hold on to that and establish that foothold and keep that territory behind them. And it seems as though the southern part of Avdiivka is falling very rapidly to the Russian forces who are advancing there. Remember, Avdiivka has been a tough nut to crack, given that it has been fortified. There's been 10 years, like I say, since 2014, for fortification of Avdiivka to occur. And it seems to be getting, the fortification seems to have become stronger the further north you move up the city. And as the Russians are approaching, they're getting closer and closer to the coke plant, and the coke plant being a big industrial concrete and steel facility anyhow, would have been quite fortified to begin with. I imagine is going to be the toughest part, and that seems to be where they're working their way towards. The Russians have been working to move up through the southern parts of the township, and big advances have been made in the last 2 days in doing that, with reportedly some of the strongest fortifications now being behind the Russians. They have got past them. And the coke plant being left until the end. The Russians have also been pressing in on the whole northeastern side of Avdiivka and expanding their zone of control around the north of Avdiivka, pushing up from there to Stepove and other townships that feed the access roads into Avdiivka. So Avdiivka now is accessible only by one road coming in from to the northwest. I might go to the map here and we can have a bit of a look at this. Just give me one moment. I haven't got my map plugged in. Some of the reporting that I saw yesterday, which is reportedly Ukrainian reports, and I will just get this geared lined up for us too. It's sounding very depressing, I guess, is how you would describe things. Now, let's just get our map going here. Hopefully you can see that. Just to explain a little bit about Avdiivka. So this is it, just as up to the northeast of Donetsk. And here, as you can see, it is this long, thin township running up here to the coke plant. What has changed recently, this yellow line of mine here is no longer correct. It was just an indicator. What has happened now is that this yellow line has effectively moved up like this now. And the Russian forces are now claiming all this land south of the yellow line and are getting into the areas of Avdiivka here. But what the Russians have done is, this is the top of the township, the coke plant here. They have been expanding this control around here and cutting off these access roads. So there is this one last access road coming in through Orlivka and Lastochne in here to Avdiivka. Severne, the Russians have advanced around here, and they've advanced around here, and effectively now this remaining road is under complete Russian fire control. So there is concern there by the Ukrainians of even their ability to be able to get out and evacuate. I'll just pop up something here that we might just have a listen to. These are radio intercepts. Now, you may not be able to see on the screen there what is written, the translation, but this is reportedly a Ukrainian soldier calling in on the radio saying, I've got 4 guys here, they're all concussed, I need to get them out, they can't do anything. We have 300 people everywhere, everyone is 300. 300 is a Soviet term for a cargo term for someone who is wounded. 200, cargo 200 is someone who is dead. He's saying here, I'm 300, Zohan's 300, everyone's 300, our blood loss has increased, I can't do anything. He goes on to say, it's heavy, people something panicking, we're not made of iron, can you help us? So, yeah, really terrible news for these guys, these Ukrainian guys, who are now becoming trapped in Avdiivka. There's just another piece of footage that I will just show you here, again from the Avdiivka area. Bring us back here, and if you just watch this. This is a Russian helicopter-launched air-to-surface missile called an LMUR. Its range is 14.5 kilometers, which is superior to any other Russian helicopter-launched missile. I'll just bring it back and watch again. This is footage from the missile itself. This isn't a drone supporting it. This is the missile, and watch the accuracy on this. Watch as it flies in and now it jumps to the left and aims for a hole in the roof. Really quite frightening, the ability of the missile to be that accurate. Just a little bit of details on this. So this is the only Russian anti-tank guided missile capable of being used in the way that it can be. It can fire in one of 2 modes. The first mode, the target is marked by the helicopter before launch, and the helicopter can then turn away after the missile's fired, and that way the missile just gets a target, goes for it as best that it can. In the second mode, the missile's launched without being locked on the target, and image from the seeker, which is in the pod at the front of that missile, is transmitted back to the helicopter via a data link pod called the ASBPLA, and the operator can select the target and change it while the missile is flying towards its area, flying towards its target, which is what we've just seen there. It was really actually quite amazing to think you've got that level of precision. From 15 kilometres away from a helicopter, you can fire a target, and in the last, what appeared to be a couple of 100 metres, divert it, a number of metres to improve the accuracy of your target. And in that footage, reportedly what was being done was that the operator had seen and was guiding the missile in through an existing hole in the roof of that building to perform more damage to the inside of the building. There are talks now, reports that Ukrainians are moving to a defensive position in this conflict. They've realised that the offensive of last year is over. They don't have the men or weapons or artillery or ammunition to be able to enact another offensive, and they understand that the Russian forces have grown to such a size and capability that they now need to prepare defences. Now, this has been happening all along the line. There's reports of 965 kilometres of the front line, the Ukrainians looking to build defences. There are talks that they are looking to build defences behind Avdiivka, and they're going to do this reportedly 16 kilometres west of Avdiivka. Now, I think this gives some indication, perhaps, of how late this defensive building may have been left. And the reason that I say that is because 16 kilometres from Avdiivka, which is where the Russians are now assuming control, and once Avdiivka is gone in that area, there are access roads up to far smaller settlements, less fortified townships. So one would expect that if the Russians wish to, their advance in that direction will be easier for them to achieve, because they're not fighting through the solid, heavily reinforced industrial centre of the north of Avdiivka. They'll be going through townships and settlements, which are just more rural in nature. So with this report that the Ukrainians are building a defensive line 16 kilometres to the west of Avdiivka, the concern here, I think, is that will put those men building those defensive positions within range of Russian artillery. Now, that will put them within range of a large amount of the just existing Russian artillery, but more specifically with the news now that the 2S-35 Kitzia SV self-propelled gun has just entered serial production, and that there are units of this already in the special military operation, and more will be rolling out. The thing about this piece, this self-propelled artillery gun, is its range and its rate of fire. It has a range of 70 kilometres. It can lob a shell 70 kilometres. So if one of these is positioned on the southern end of Avdiivka, well out of range of Ukrainian artillery, it could, if they so decided, start to pick off the men who are trying to now defend, build the defensive line to the west of Avdiivka. And not being worried about actually picking off the defences, they could actually be attacking the guys while they're trying to build them. And this has been reported by a few people that they feel like the move by Ukraine from offence to defence wasn't enacted quickly enough, and this has been generally blamed on President Zelinsky and Zelinsky, with their desire to hold on to Bakhmut at any cost, their desire to hold on to Avdiivka for so long, which has required them to pour in more and more troops into those areas, take troops from other locations, and take troops from having the time to be able to build these defensive positions. So with the Kitzia rolling out, even those sort of things now, this move to defensive development may be too late, and particularly if it's trying to be achieved along a 965 kilometre front. There will certainly be areas in there where there will be gaps, and there will be challenges for the Ukrainians if the Russians continue to push. If the decision is being made now with the growing Russian army, I saw some report yesterday that there is 1 million men in the Russian army still within Russia. At all levels, all across Russia, but the strength of the Russian army now is such that they have their 300,000 or 400,000 in Ukraine itself, and there's another 1 million estimated in Russia. So if Russia has decided that it is now time to move things, move westward, perhaps get to the point where this conflict ends in some respect by putting enough pressure on the Ukrainian leadership that they are either ousted for someone who's willing to negotiate, or they themselves just reach the understanding that they are going to destroy more and more of Ukraine if they continue to fight, because the Russians aren't looking at stopping at this stage, and instead they would be better to negotiate and just give up land, the oblast that Russia is likely to wish to control. So that may well be what's in the future for Ukraine if they continue here. There's also reports now that around Chasiv Yar, which is to the west of Bakhmut or Artyomovsk, that it is now coming under attack from a distance, artillery and some drone attack by the Russians. Chasiv Yar, again, is considered to be quite a fortified location, and it was a great support base for Bakhmut, was able to support Bakhmut very well. Now the Russians are approaching Chasiv Yar, and it looks as though that in the coming days and weeks that what has happened to Bakhmut and to Avdiivka will now start to occur to Chasiv Yar. Most likely some sort of a pincer maneuver around Chasiv Yar itself, rather than trying to just take it head on. But instead encircle it, cut off the access roads, degrade the ability of the Ukrainian fighters in Chasiv Yar to be able to continue to defend it, and then ultimately overrun Chasiv Yar. Now, Donetsk has obviously been in the news a lot, but it has been in the news quite a bit again over the last couple of days. Not only were a couple of power substations hit in Donetsk and Makiivka, but an artillery strike was launched on a market in Donetsk, and as of yesterday, the strike on that public civilian market has killed 28 people. The market was shelled. As I said before, there have been 10 years of sporadic shelling of Donetsk city. In UN reporting of the conflict, there are reported to be, or estimated to be, over 10,000 civilians have died in this Ukrainian war, this conflict with Russia, or the Russian special military operation. So 10,000 civilians killed. A large percentage of those have been within the Donetsk region, and the large majority of those people killed have been killed by Ukrainian shelling in this area. So you remember there has been like a civil war going on in Ukraine since 2014. There's been this overt Russian involvement since February of 2022, but prior to that, the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics wanted to gain their independence, and they have been fighting for that against the Ukrainian military and government from 2014. Now, civil wars are often the most vicious, it seems, and there have been many reports of the sporadic shelling of Donetsk city. And this is one of the reasons why Avdiivka is important in this conflict, for many reasons. For the Ukrainians, it's been a defensive strong point. For them to lose it is obviously a loss in terms of morale and position on the front line. For the Russians and the people of Donetsk to be able to capture it, retake it, and stop it being a position that can shell the city is obviously going to be seen as a massive victory to them. And it appears as though that it will be happening soon, and it's just because of the physics of war here. The Russian tactics to surround and cut off the supply roads means that, as we heard, and I was sort of reading the captions of that Ukrainian soldier, they are struggling, those that are remaining in there. They're needing help to get out. Everybody's wounded. He's got people who are wounded and concussed and can't pick up a rifle. They're just really struggling, panicking, and wanting to get out of there. The front line, I'm just going to go very quick summary on the front line today. 2 days ago, and this is just like, if this frontline reporting from the Russian Ministry of Defense is correct, then we are seeing variations and fluctuations from day to day in activity. What the reasons for that might be, I don't know, and there may be many of them. Two days ago, for example, the Russian Ministry of Defense reports 565 Ukrainian servicemen killed or wounded. Yesterday, that number has jumped to 1,005. Now, 2 days ago, 5 artillery pieces and 1 self-propelled piece reportedly destroyed. In yesterday's fighting, 24 artillery pieces and 6 self-propelled pieces reportedly destroyed. So there may be a number of reasons for this. Weather may be one. The change in weather. Fog, for example, one day that is foggy, or one day we are getting a lot of snow, can slow things right down. Again, just the pure physics of it. With fog, if the fog is thick, then you haven't got reconnaissance ability. You actually can't see where you're shooting. You can't see what's coming. People become hesitant and less likely to want to attack into an enemy that they can't see and determine where the opportunities might lay. You've got that. There may also be a change in tactics. And it may be like in the case of Avdiivka in the Donetsk area, where we've seen this large jump. A number of these increased losses in servicemen have come from the Donetsk area, and that may have been from Avdiivka. And that may be because the Russians have bridged the gap across the fields to the southern part, established a foothold there, and have been fighting there for a day, and they may, as the reporting seems to indicate, have been successful and be advancing. And so it's possible that's why we're seeing an increase in that area in the number of reported casualties. The Russian Ministry of Defense indicates that it gets its estimates for Ukrainian losses in terms of servicemen from intercepted communications, much like that one that we were listening to before, assuming that that is a valid communication. I don't have any reason from where I got that to really doubt that it is a real intercepted communication. I'm sure that communication intercepts happen frequently, and they're attempted to happen all the time. There is also a channel, the Volga channel, which the Russians have created along the front line. And it is an open channel, and the Ukrainians are aware of it, the frequency to get onto it, and it is specifically there to allow Ukrainians who wish to surrender to be able to communicate with the Russians and indicate to them that, hey, we're here, we want to surrender, don't shoot us if we come out. In terms, just one bit more on the front line there. Again, the numbers today reported by the Ukrainians, for the last 24 hours, 1,005 servicemen reported killed and wounded. This is a big number. There have been days I've reported in the past where we've reached 1,000. This aligns with what the Ukrainian Interior Minister stated last week as being what he believes to be the number of Ukrainian troops lost and killed and wounded per day. And just to clarify that for those who maybe think I misspoke, that was the Ukrainian Interior Minister, not the Russian one. The Ukrainian members of the Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada, their parliament, are now themselves saying that Ukraine is losing 30,000 men a month, killed or wounded. Today's reporting from the Russian Ministry of Defense aligns perfectly with that number. Yesterday's number is about half of that. But again, artillery pieces, 24 artillery pieces reportedly lost yesterday, and 6 of them being the self-propelled pieces, which are very valuable to Ukraine and a real loss for them if they lose them. They're not being resupplied by the NATO nations. In the aid packages that we're seeing being provided, what's coming through is much smaller, more focused on air defence and perhaps electronic warfare. Not seeing armoured pieces of equipment, big pieces of artillery come through anymore. So these ones that are being destroyed are gone for good. Those that are being damaged and possibly repairable As we saw in some Ukrainian reporting yesterday or the day before, they are struggling to repair them because if they need to be repaired, they need to send them to Lithuania. They can't repair them in Ukraine because of the Russian missile strikes, which have been targeting repair and manufacturing and fabrication facilities in Ukraine where tanks and artillery could have been sent to be repaired. So the Ukrainians are struggling on many fronts, being able to restock, resupply not only their troops, but their artillery on the front line. Now, in terms of leadership and the feel of what is going on in Ukraine, the Kyiv Mayor Vitali Klitschko, many of you will know him and his brother, ex-heavyweight champions, serious boxers. Vitali, the mayor, is now concerned that the freedoms and reforms Ukraine's fought for during two pro-Western revolutions, or coups, depending on how you look at what happened in Ukraine at that time, earlier this century, are being negated. He says, the movement that we are seeing right now, I cannot call democracy. And what he's speaking about here is current President Zelinsky's administration. Klitschko said he shared his concerns in conversations with Western ambassadors based in Kyiv. Asked if some of these diplomats shared his concerns, he said yes. Klitschko said, a large part of society doesn't understand exactly what is happening on the front lines and therefore doesn't understand the military's demand for 500,000 recruits. Now, I'm reading and speculating here, but what I'm speculating he is saying here is that a large part of Ukrainian society doesn't know how bad it is at the front line, and thus, when they're hearing requests for 500,000 people to mobilise, they don't understand that demand. Because why would we need to be mobilising 500,000 men if we're winning, if we're doing so well, and if we're not losing lots of men? This is what I'm reading into what he's saying. I may be wrong. According to Klitschko, his country is moving in the wrong direction, becoming increasingly autocratic. He says, for the past 23 months, Ukraine's main TV channels have broadcast a single program, the United News Telethon, which Klitschko says leaves little room for dissenting voices, while journalists critical of President Zelinsky and his administration come under pressure. So as you can imagine, the walls are starting to close in on Volodymyr Zelinsky, the president. He's losing on the front line. He's losing his support. He's getting to a position where the Russians are going to take land, and he's going to be caught, and he will become the scapegoat for that. He may try and cut Zelinsky loose first and throw him under the bus, but ultimately the people will turn to look at him, and he will be ousted. Zelinsky won't remain as president past this conflict concluding, and that's been made quite clear by for example, the Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov. They know that they can't negotiate with Zelinsky. Zelensky's even put into law in Ukraine that while Vladimir Putin is president of Russia, there can be no negotiations with Russia. So someone else will step in and will override that and will then negotiate with Russia. And most likely will be someone who is accepted by the Russians and okay with the Americans, I would suggest, is who will end up taking that position. Ex-Prime Minister of Ukraine, Yulia Tymoshenko, has perhaps tacitly indicated that she might be someone who could play that role. There are other people who have been suggested. There is a former Ukrainian politician, but he's Russian and friends of Vladimir Putin, who's back in Russia after being expelled from Ukraine. He's someone who Vladimir Putin might be happy to assist to get into power and be someone that they could deal with, and he could then control Ukraine and ensure it remained out of NATO, that type of thing. Just speaking on the fact, just following on from what the mayor of Kyiv, Vitali Klitschko, has been saying about him feeling that Ukraine is becoming less democratic and more autocratic. This is something that I picked up from a Telegram channel yesterday, Ukrainian Telegram channel. This is one of the 2 Ukrainian Telegram channels that seem to have connections with the military and the Zelinsky administration, some contact or source in there. They appear to be quite reliable. This talks about Article 436-2. The Article 436-2 of the Ukrainian Criminal Code bans the justification, recognition as lawful, or denial of the armed aggression of Russia against Ukraine, or glorification of its participants. In practice, any sort of criticism of Ukrainian authorities can fall under this and this part of the mechanism. This is the tool that Ukraine uses to effectively muzzle the society. This is coming from a Ukrainian channel. This isn't Russian channel saying this. So Article 436-2 of the Ukrainian Criminal Code bans the justification, recognition as lawful, or denial of the armed aggression of Russia against Ukraine. So this aligns, I guess, with what Vitali Klitschko is saying, that if you were to say, well, hang on, maybe there was some, while you're in Ukraine, there was some justification for Russia coming in and doing this because they were supporting the Donetsk and Lugansk people who wanted their independence from Ukraine, and we were shelling them, and that's illegal under the criminal code. You can't say that. This doesn't sound like the democratic rights and free speech being protected in Ukraine. And of course, you can say, well, you're dreaming if you think that would ever happen in wartime. Well, you would hope that even in wartime, a real country claiming to be democratic and believing in free speech would allow that to happen. Now, of course, I'm not that naive. I know that it doesn't. I mean, there are many, many examples of people who are trying to freely speak and give news about what has actually happened. Julian Assange, of course, is an extreme example. And their right to freedom and free speech have been lost because of that. Gonzalo Lira, who has just died in Ukraine through neglect, it seems, speaking out against the Ukrainian administration and Zelinsky from within Ukraine, there because his children were there in Ukraine, imprisoned and has died. Just examples, I guess, which parallel with what the Ukrainian mayor of Kyiv is starting to say about how Ukraine is being run. All right, let's finish off on a couple of things here. Ukraine is wanting its refugees to come back. Ukrainian presidential advisor Sergei Leshchenko has called on European countries to stop supporting Ukrainian refugees and send them home. So those 6 million people who left Ukraine when this conflict began, for various reasons. Some of them would have been in areas where Russia was taking over and they wouldn't have wanted to be Russian. Some of them would have been in areas where fighting was occurring and they couldn't live there any longer. And some of them would have been people who had just at that stage had enough and were going, for safety. They wanted their kids out of the country, so they weren't involved in a country in war. Millions of them, over 6 million people left. Some went to Russia, lots of them went to Europe. Now it seems as though the administration is wanting those people back. So, you left for a reason. Well, we don't care. We want you back to come and fight. Reports that I saw yesterday indicate that the number of people who have voluntarily done that is very low. I don't know if this number is correct, but it's some indicating it's as low as 100 people reportedly have left as a refugee, have left the country, and then have voluntarily returned to fight. That may not be right. But I guess it's not surprising. If you make the effort, a war starts in your country, you make the effort to leave the country, not go and fight, and you're capable and willing and within the age range, you leave the country, I guess you're unlikely to then later on, 2 years later or whatever, decide to come back and want to fight. So perhaps that number is correct. But anyhow, as the idea of mobilization increases, looks like the Ukrainians are looking for any avenue they can to pull and bully people back in to go to fight. Kirill Budanov, who is the head of the military intelligence in Ukraine. He has stated that mass mobilization is required in order for Ukraine to continue to fight. There are also reports that I've seen that due to the financial problems that Ukraine is having, most clearly defined being the delays in receiving $64 billion of funding from the United States, which in the United States is being drawn out because House Speaker Mike Johnson has tied the provision of that aid to Ukraine and provision of $16 billion of aid to Israel to concrete measures by the Biden administration on securing the southern border of America, where currently it is porous and there are people who are undocumented coming over the border into America, thousands of people each day. That tying those together means that Ukraine isn't getting his money. And every day that Ukraine isn't getting this money, it is becoming less and less likely that Ukraine can continue to fight. Salaries for people aren't being paid. Pensions aren't being paid. Money's not being invested in things that need investment. And it seems that for the mobilisation, the challenge may be that even if people are mobilised, there is no money to pay their salaries. Now, if that's the case, that's only going to strengthen people's resolve not to be mobilised and likely strengthen and increase the number of people looking to leave the country as a refugee. If they're at the point now where they're being faced with going to the front line and not being paid or trying to get out of the country, there'll be many people who will be making that choice to get out of the country. And just one thing here that I just want to talk about too, and what has happened to Europe since this conflict has begun. And just to make this simple, again, in the numbers terms, we hear lots about European nations suffering economically, going into recession, their governments getting under pressure, likely to be toppled. We're seeing some of them changing due to their increased energy costs, which they have locked their countries and their citizens into by engaging in sanctions against Russia and the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines. As an example, in Germany, BASF, which is a major global chemical company, its earnings have dropped from 23 to 22 from nearly $7 billion to under $4 billion. So the revenue, the incomes have dropped a lot, from 6.9 billion to 3.8 billion. High energy prices are part of the problem. Reportedly, though, what is happening at BASF is that they are making a €4 billion cut in investment into their assets. And so their financial statement for this year is going to look okay because there's an extra $4 billion in this cut in what would have been investment into the company. So shareholders will get their dividends this year and everything will look rosy. But next year and in the years following that, there has been a lack of investment in the growth of the company, and that will ultimately come back to bite them. So this is happening. Now, you've just got to consider how things could have been different for the European nations. Russia is a country of 140 million people. It is a big population. Had a different tact been taken, had instead of conflict with Russia, the decision was to strengthen ties through trade with Russia, then the European market would have retained and could have been able to grow a market of 140 million people right on their doorstep. They could have sold their goods to 140 million Russians. And furthermore, those Russians could have been enticed, to buy more and more. But instead, with the sanctions and forcing Russia to look inwards and produce domestically, which is what it's doing now, there's now a market of 140 million people that has just been taken away from those European economies to purchase from or to sell their goods to. Not being able to purchase from Russia, which is a major exporter, has a wealth of resources that everybody wants, just means for those European nations, all of those resource costs went up for them. And not having 140 million people to be able to sell your stuff to means your economy has just shrunk again. These sort of things they don't seem to be called out clearly or thought about sometimes, but that's what's had a big impact on the European economies. In terms of just a little bit of an update on a couple of the topics I've been talking about, because these ones will come back. We'll continue talking about these. Steadfast Defender, the NATO exercises kicking off in a couple of weeks through Poland, Germany, and then I think up to Estonia and Lithuania, Latvia, primarily involving all 31 of the NATO nations and Sweden being invited. Sweden is not a NATO nation. The German component of it, Quadriga 2024, is Germany's largest battlefield exercise, and that will be starting as part of that. There's also a Nordic component happening, and there is a British component happening. So there is a lot going on in that region between now February and May. There'll be hundreds of NATO jets mobilised for exercises, aircraft carriers, all sorts of things going on. Again, one wonders if this might be used as a foil to allow NATO to make some advance somewhere. I don't know, maybe try and take Kaliningrad if they wanted to do that for some reason. I'm just speculating here. But as I said at last year's Defender series, Defender 2023, when there were reportedly going to be 220 modern jet aircraft in exercises, again, I said at that stage, well, Ukraine doesn't have F-16s or F-22s or F-35s, but if you've got 200 of them just in the neighbouring nations around Poland and Germany and the Czech Republic and all that, well, I guess if you wanted to, you could just say, okay, boys, do it now. And they could have all flown and attacked. Yes, I'm simplifying things, of course, but you could have done it. And here again, we're reaching a position where suddenly NATO's ready. 90,000 troops are going to be involved in this. So it might be, it looks like we're doing an exercise where we're going to pretend that Russia's attacking us from Kaliningrad and we're going to pretend to attack back, but then they get the call, hit the live fire, go for it. And you've now got forces and troops and men mobilised and ready. It's a possibility. Of course, I'm speculating, but it's a possibility. A couple of other things just to finish up on. The A-50, reports of the A-50 AWACS Russian plane being shot down about a week ago does not seem to be verified by anyone. Reports were that an A-50 and an Ilyushin 22 were shot down in the Sea of Azov and both crashed, coming from the Ukrainian side. Subsequently, what we have seem to have learnt is that an IL-22 was struck by air defence and it was damaged and crew were wounded. And yesterday there were reports that in fact the captain or the pilot of that IL-22, which was operating as a mobile command post, has died from his wounds. And Russian air defence has claimed responsibility for shooting down that IL-22. Again, I don't know how that happens, but it does happen, and there are reports that there is a friend or foe system used to indicate which craft is which, and something had gone wrong with that. Anyhow, but no reports of the A-50 being shot down or damaged at all. So it seems as though the A-50 was just tacked on, but I can't find anything which indicates that it has actually been damaged. The two Navy SEALs who went missing in the Red Sea, bottom of the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, on that topic there's been 10 days now, no recovery of their bodies, and CENTCOM, the US military, has come out and said that they believe that those two men are dead. They were reportedly boarding a Iranian boat carrying weapons to Yemen. It was interesting. Admiral John Kirby, White House spokesperson, was interviewed on Face the Nation a week or so ago and was asked directly about that and said, has that got anything to do with the attacks on Yemen? And he said, no, absolutely nothing to do with that whatsoever. And yet it was an Iranian ship apparently carrying weapons to Yemen, but it was not at all related to that. Anyhow, One of the Navy SEALs apparently fell into the water. The other one saw that, and their protocol is to go in to assist. They both went into the water. They've not been found. One wonders what has happened. Many things could have happened here, I guess. They may have drowned, although the weather conditions were considered to be quite good, I think. Water temperatures were warm. They would have no doubt had some level of transponder on them identifying where they were. Perhaps they were shot. Perhaps they didn't necessarily fall off the side. Maybe they were seen. Maybe they were encountered gunfire and they were shot, and that may have happened, and they may have died and drowned, and that's why they haven't been recovered. There is another story floating around that in fact this is all a cover story for the fact that 2 Navy servicemen were lost, but that they were the pilots of an F-18 which was shot down by the Houthis. I'm not just making this up. This was, I think I was reading this on John Helmer's website. He's suggesting that is the actual source of the 2 missing Navy servicemen, and that the Navy have a problem because they have 2 men missing, gone, dead, killed in a shot down plane. They need to be able to account for the 2 missing men. So they're saying, oh, well, they were actually on a boat and this is what's happened, because that's an acceptable way to lose them. Having an F-18 shot down by the Houthis is not an acceptable way to lose 2 men. And again, I don't know if this is at all true, but it's interesting that Helmer would mention that if he didn't feel he had some reason to back that up. And then finally, in terms of Ukraine, there's still no sightings of Lloyd Austin, unless in the last couple of hours since I've done this report, there have been. I haven't seen any. We are still seeing little snippets coming out that he met with someone and he spoke to someone, and not getting full transcripts of here's the whole conversation, but just that they met and they discussed this and that. He met apparently 2 days ago with a Swedish defence minister or foreign minister, but there's been no pictures, there's been no video. It's been 3 weeks now since he reportedly was taken back to hospital after originally having prostate surgery on the 22nd of December, returning to hospital on the 1st of January and being admitted to ICU for complications with that. It's now the 23rd of January, 3 weeks later, and nothing, not a picture, no video, no audio of him speaking. So many people are wondering, is there something to this story that actually he was on one of his secret trips in Ukraine and he was a victim of one of the Russian missile attacks on which was targeted at NATO command centres? It seems unusual that we haven't seen anything of him. Now, I'm not saying that he is dead. Some people are suggesting he's dead. Maybe. He may be alive. He may have been wounded, though, and that's why they can't show him, because he was wounded in such a way that a urinary tract infection would not cover that. You know, there may be some blast damage or burns or something like that to his face, and they need to give him a month for that to heal and grow a beard or whatever it might be, to be able to then bring him back out and go, see, we told you he was just sick, just really bad urinary tract infection. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see when we actually get to see him and see him speaking and walking again. Okay, turning now to the Middle East, just very briefly. Joseph Borrell, who is the EU's High Representative for Foreign Policy and Security, just going to read his statements. The bad news is that Israel, in particular its government, is completely refusing, and yesterday Netanyahu said it again as if he was anticipating my words today, to accept a two-state solution that he has personally been boycotting for the past 30 years. So this has come out after Netanyahu was rebuking calls by Washington, by the United States, to establish a Palestinian state. And Tony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, has been in the Middle East the week before last, zipping around 9 different nations and repeatedly popping up and saying, look, what I'm hearing from the Arab nations is a two-state solution is what we need. A two-state solution is what we need. And we're going to talk to the Israelis about it. And Netanyahu has said, no, it's not happening. From the river to the sea is what Benjamin Netanyahu has started to say. It will all be Israel-controlled. So interesting that Joseph Borrell is coming out and saying this so straightforwardly now. We'll go on with what Borrell has said, and this I did a video on this yesterday that you can see. But Borrell says, but I insist, Israel, by continuing to reject this solution, has gone as far as to create Hamas themselves. Yes, Hamas has been financed by the Israeli government in an attempt to weaken the Palestinian Authority led by Fatah. And this is, as I talked about in the video yesterday, you can see it find it on the channel. There is an article in the Jerusalem Post from 2019 where they are talking about this, how Netanyahu is saying, yes, we decided to take the money, we'd be the middleman when the Qataris who support Hamas, when the Qataris want to give money to them, well, they can give it to us and we'll give it to them. So we know what's going on with it then. So Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, his administration have been involved in the financing of Hamas. And Joseph Borrell calling this out in a big way now. This says two things to me. One, I don't think Borrell's probably got long to go in his role. I don't know what the term of it is meant to be, but I can imagine he's going to be coughing a lot of pressure now to step down. Probably direct cries from Israelis that he'd step down. But also, this is an indication of how the opinion of Israel and its government and its military has changed on the global stage since October the 7th. And I was saying this from the start, and a lot of people were saying this, that Israel had to be very careful about how they managed this, how they managed the response to October the 7th. You know, there's been calls out there where people of Israel, from Israel, have said everyone in Gaza has to accept this. It's collective responsibility for what happened on October the 7th. Of course, then the response is, well, is it then collective responsibility to what has happened from October the 8th until today? That's something you probably wouldn't have heard in large voices or large numbers previously. But as this has drawn on, this Israeli campaign of bombing and killing civilians in Gaza has gone on and on and on, seeing them brought to the International Court of Justice on charges of genocide, seeing open conflict now between Tony Blinken saying a two-state solution is what we need, and Netanyahu saying, nope, this conflict is growing. And it shows what we're seeing now. It shows a large sea change in the level of support for Israel. And I think with a lot of people who probably was in the background of their mind, Middle East, they knew nothing about it. Now they've become informed, have decided they're sitting on the side of Palestinians and the people being bombed and not with the Israelis. This, I think, has been badly managed by the Israelis. And it may well, as I said in a video again yesterday, I think it was the day before, that what we might be seeing here is Benjamin Netanyahu's goals and desires, not necessarily the goals and desires of all Israeli people, certainly not the goals and desires of all Jewish people, but perhaps his goals and desires being enacted out while he's in power. Who knows? Other things in the Middle Eastern area, of course, the Houthis, their fight continuing. Reports today that the marine vessel, the Ocean Jazz, may have been a recent target in the last 24 hours of the Houthis. Hezbollah, there are reports that the Israelis are giving ultimatums to Hezbollah and saying, if you guys don't stop skirmishing with us on the northern border and back off, we will be forced to attack Lebanon. And there were in Beirut, it seems there were some flares dropped over Beirut, I believe it was night before yesterday, in like a mock attack. There has been previous reports from the Israeli military that if Hezbollah join in a fight with Israel, then Beirut will look like Gaza. So again, escalations here. This is something which would really see this grow into a regional conflict, because Hezbollah has some firepower and can do some real damage to Israel. Israel can do some real damage. And if that's happening to Beirut, again, then we are likely to see support from other areas grow. In Syria, In Syria, there are claims of drone strikes by the Iraqi Islamic resistance on US bases in Syria. Now, remember, the US bases in Syria, the US bases there consist of an occupying force. The Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad, he doesn't want the American forces and bases there. He hasn't asked for them to be there. They're an occupying force, and they are reportedly protecting some access to oil fields and US access to oil. I haven't gone into that in depth, but there seems to be some reports and video indicating that the US are taking some oil out of that area for whatever purpose. Anyhow, still lots going on. Escalations happening. We're not seeing what's happening in the Middle East calm down and stop anytime soon. All right, I'll leave it there for today. I hope you're enjoying the channel, and look, I hope you're having a good week. I will talk to you again soon.